Hola, comrades. Today's topic of interest, The Elder Scrolls V, Skyrim, and music in fantasy. Music connects us across time and culture, so is it any surprise that it is able to connect us across worlds? In works more grounded in our reality, music isn't as necessary. It can highlight an emotion or a mood, but it's not essential. Our world and the world of the work at hand are already entangled and intertwined, as they have to be for us to get involved in the work. In fantasy, there's a more daunting challenge. It's not surprising that some of the movies and TV shows with the most evocative scores, such as The Lord of the Rings, or Game of Thrones, or The Legend of Korra, belong to fantasy works. They need to build their universe from the ground up, and music is essential to that. It doesn't just connect us with singular emotions, but rather establishes and reinforces the ambience of the locale. For games, it is even more vital. Movies and TV shows guide us along a path, but in video games we're dumped into a world. Final Fantasy, one of the most acclaimed series in gaming history, has had soundtracks so good that a live orchestra dedicated to them, and touring worldwide, Distant Worlds, was spawned. But it isn't just Distant Worlds. There is an entire, fairly lengthy Wikipedia page dedicated to Final Fantasy concerts. I'll post a link in the description. There are an absurd number of Final Fantasy games, but they're tied together by their style, and a large component of that style is the music. The series is defined as much by its music as by its stories and characters. The West's premier fantasy gaming series, The Elder Scrolls, takes it a step further and is defined more by its music than by story and characters. In the beginning, great fantasy games were mostly imported from Japan. Aside from the aforementioned Final Fantasy, there was Dragon Quest, the Tales series, and of course The Legend of Zelda. There was a definite mold these games fell into, but they were different enough that they were able to carve out different niches, both in Japan and the West. On March 25th, 1994, a little game called The Elder Scrolls Arena was released in North America for the PC. It was not a major hit. There are computer nerds of a certain age who have fond memories of playing this game, but the general public was mostly left unawares. This was not changed much with the release of the second game in the series, Daggerfall, 2 years later. What set these games apart is their massive size. In an era where JRPGs were becoming more focused on story, The Elder Scrolls focused on exploration, on giving the players a massive sandbox world to explore. Bethesda claims that the world of Daggerfall is the size of Great Britain. It's hard to relate just how massive that is, so let me say that the world of the next game, Morrowind, was 1/10,000th the size. But bigger worlds do not equal better games, and Daggerfall went mostly under the radar, while the more polished Morrowind, which was released in 2002 on both PC and Xbox, was a major critical and commercial hit. If you're a longtime Elder Scrolls fan, this is likely the first game of the series you played. Like in the previous two games, the story was nothing to write home about, but the lore-rich, interactive, stunning world was exemplary, and a large part of that was due to the music. This is the first game of the series with a score composed by Jeremy Soule, a man whose name is now tied to great gaming soundtracks. Unlike JRPGs of the time like Tales of Symphonia and Final Fantasy X, Morrowind provides an exploration free of form, an experience you're free to shape. But what would that matter if the experience were not worth shaping? If it were boring and cliché? The first two games of the Elder Scrolls series threatened to fall into this trap, but Morrowind decisively navigates out of it. The player sinks possibly hundreds of hours into the game, and a vital facet of ensuring that they're engrossed all the way through is to construct a musical score that builds a personal connection with them. Listen to the Morrowind theme. I'll play a little of it for you here. That's mysterious and ethereal, but inviting. You want to jump right in. If you want proof of how much of a difference music makes, check out one of those cute videos where they make a horror trailer for a kid's movie or something like that. That's partially done with clever cutting, but it's primarily done with music. When you're a video producer such as myself, it's hard to lose track of the importance of music. I play appropriate music underneath my analyses, and the specific track I choose changes the tone entirely. Choose one piece and you sound dark and menacing, while if you choose another piece, you sound inspiring and uplifting. It's uncanny. Mathematicians like to state that the world is made up of numbers, but how we experience the world is through emotions. This is a basic but fundamental truth. In the grand scheme of things, it doesn't matter if that chair is sodden and cerulean blue. There would be little practical difference if the chair was dry and cinnabar red, but there is a difference, an emotional difference. This is important to the topic of this video, because music taps into our emotions more primordially than any other art form, and a connection is formed. It is no coincidence that The Lord of the Rings, the most beloved fantasy novel ever written, is filled with music and songs. It doesn't matter if we're in a different world, if the islands are floating and the marshes are glowing and there are 2 moons instead of 1, we respond to music the same way. This goes doubly for songs with lyrics that are part of the universe, as in songs that exist in their worlds. These are common in Lord of the Rings and many great fantasy works. For the Elder Scrolls, the most famous of these is the Song of the Dragonborn from Skyrim. There are other great ones, of course, but for the sake of focus and clarity, I'm going to limit the scope of this discussion. Song of the Dragonborn is sung in Davazul, or the dragon language, and while I find as a whole that the creators of fantasy works put too much of an effort in developing new languages for their works, having a song be sung and heard in that language can add an extra dimension of depth. Having a major song recorded in an invented language marks a sophistication and maturation of the series between the acclaimed Morrowind and the even more acclaimed Skyrim. In between those two, in 2006, Oblivion was released, the first game in the series with voice acting and a great project all around, but not as innovative or immersive as either its predecessor or its sequel. Skyrim was released on November the 11th, 2011, or 11/11/11. In the 5+ years since it has been released, it has garnered a reputation as one of the greatest games of all time, and along with Breath of the Wild, it is the greatest example of an open world done right. Fitting, considering Morrowind was one of the first great open-world games. Everyone wants to ape Skyrim's formula, the sprawling environment and endless replayability that, along with improved characters and customizability and a better story, led to it sweeping the gaming world by storm. But most of these Skyrim-esque games are failures because they fail to build an emotional connection with the player. The main quest of Skyrim is epic. You're the Dragonborn, and your journey is to destroy the vile dragon Alduin. Nevertheless, it is practically mandatory for Skyrim players to ignore the main quest for 40 to 50 hours and just explore the world. Players don't do this because that's just how they naturally want to play. They do this because the game creates this enticing world. When there's nothing but sand and endless brownness and boring music, you don't grab players' attention. But when you visit a stream babbling through a forest, or ride a horse across the plains at night beneath an aurora, you're bonded to the game, and with the lush orchestral score, that bond is amplified. When you stop playing Skyrim because you're exhausted and dream at night about what you've just played, you don't just dream about the places. The dreams are filled with that music too. That's how essential the score is to the overall experience. When creating a fantasy game, it's an uphill battle to make players connect with your work. They want to be taken in by it, but they need a way out of their own world. The music offers them a way out. If you're a player, instead of worrying about work or school and the banalities of everyday living, you get to climb mountains and battle dragons. At its best, music in fantasy can be an escape route, a bridge connecting this world entirely made by the developers to your own. What players want most of all in open world games is the license to lose themselves in the experience, and the Elder Scrolls series in general, and Skyrim most of all, offer a master class in this. By the power of music, the barrier between you and the game vanishes, and you can see it as it was meant to be seen. Without the music, it's a case of I'm playing through Tamriel. With the music, it's a case of I am in Tamriel. This was something a little different for my channel. I hope you enjoyed it. I love experimenting. If you liked what you saw today, consider donating to my Patreon so I can produce even more amazing content. Also, like, comment, subscribe, all that scintillating stuff. Adios, comrades!